Hello, and thank you for watching. My name is Otis Landerholm. I'm an immigration lawyer. My law office is Landerholm Immigration, A.P.C. Our tagline is, "We fight for your American dream." Really what we do is we help immigrants who are looking to stay in the United States. And one of the ways that we can help people is through the process of asylum. So thank you very much for clicking on this video series and for signing up for this video series. The idea, I guess I'll start with the agenda. The agenda of this series, it's going to be a 3-video series. The first video I'm going to talk about asylum eligibility and kind of what is asylum, who's eligible and what it's all about. The second video I'll talk about really the forms, the paperwork, the process, kind of how to apply for asylum. And then the third video I want to talk about some of the risks involved, some of the costs involved, some of the alternatives if you don't think you maybe are eligible for asylum. And then I'm going to emphasize the value of coming in for a consultation and really determining whether or not you're eligible for asylum or for some other form of immigration relief. Okay? So that's the plan. Again, thank you very much. To start with, I need to give a big warning and a big disclaimer because I am recording this on May 3rd of 2014. Okay? Asylum law, just like any law, the law changes. If you are watching this after May 3rd of 2014, it is possible that a new law has passed, and it is very, very likely that a new decision has come down. There are always new decisions coming down on asylum law. So it is important and very, very critical that you meet with an asylum lawyer who's reviewing the law on a regular basis before you apply and before you sort of rely on everything that I'm saying right now. The other thing is, every case, every individual's life is different, and because of that, every case for asylum is very different. I am just doing sort of the general one-size-fits-all kind of video here. It is not legal advice for your specific situation. If you want legal advice on your specific situation, please, at the end of this, call my office and let's schedule a consultation so that I can really determine whether or not, if I were you and knowing the law that I know, would I apply for asylum in your situation? And the question really is, would I recommend that you apply for asylum? All right, the other thing that I have to say is asylum is incredibly risky. Okay, there is a risk of deportation. So if you file an asylum application and if you lose, it is very likely that the judge would order your deportation. So because of that, all the more reason to schedule a consultation if you have any doubt whatsoever. And even if you don't have any doubt, it's incredibly important, and it is worth your well-being to have a consultation before going into this process. The other thing is, don't go in alone, okay? So, all right, let's talk about asylum law. The point of asylum is to protect people. The word asylum means protection, okay? The law was passed, and really it was based on international law. The 1951 Geneva Convention was passed after all of the atrocities in World War II, right, against Jewish folks in Nazi Germany and in other parts of the world, okay? So the idea is to protect people that are fleeing from genocide, that are fleeing from serious persecution, and to prevent the government from deporting people back to a dangerous part of the world. So if you are afraid for your life in your country, then you are watching the right video, and we are talking about asylum. That's sort of what the whole point is all about. All right. So the questions that my office gets every day, the questions that I'm answering all the time, is basically, am I eligible for asylum? What are the risks involved? What are the benefits involved? What are the costs? What would I, as the lawyer, recommend in their situation? And the big question, how do I apply? So if those are your questions, then again, thank you for watching. Welcome to this video series. I hope to address each of them as we go forward. All right. The big question is the first one. Am I eligible to apply for asylum? Okay, so let's talk about asylum eligibility. Basically, you have to show that you have a quote-unquote well-founded fear of quote-unquote persecution on account of your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or your quote-unquote membership in a particular social group in your country. And the fifth is that you can't have triggered any of the bars to asylum. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each one of these 5 kind of requirements, and I'm not going to spend tons of time on them, but I want you to be familiar with them because that makes it critical in your case. All right, so step 1 is you have to have a quote-unquote well-founded fear. Well, what does this mean? All right, so the term well-founded fear has 2 components. It has an objective component and a subjective component. The subjective means that you, the applicant, have to actually be afraid of going back to your home country. And you have to convince the asylum officer or the judge that you really are afraid to go back. Okay? The objective component is that you have to show that your fear, your subjective fear, is actually reasonable, is objectively, it makes sense. And we generally do that by showing articles, newspaper reports, things like that of what's going on in your country so that we can show that, look, I'm afraid and my fear is reasonable because, look, here's all these things that are happening. Okay? That's basically all I need to say right now about a well-founded fear. The second element is quote-unquote persecution. So what does the word persecution mean? It is a very fact-specific analysis, but it basically means physical harm against your person or against your humanity, okay? So, for example, rape, torture, physical violence, physical detention, beatings, assault, these are and have been found to rise to the level of quote-unquote persecution for the purposes of asylum law. Okay, detention, threats of serious harm or death, severe psychological, emotional types of harm have been found to rise to the level of persecution as well. The things that are less likely to be persecution is if you are afraid of property damage in your home country. If you're afraid that if you go back, somebody's going to, bash the window of your car in because somebody's done it twice already, that probably doesn't rise to the level of persecution for the purpose of filing for asylum. Also, if you are afraid of being arrested by the government because you committed a crime in your country, there's a difference between persecution and quote-unquote prosecution. So if the government is trying to actually arrest you because you did something wrong, that generally is not persecution, with the only exception of is if that arrest is not legitimate. If they're arresting you and they're going to detain you for the rest of your life for committing a traffic violation, then okay, let's talk. That probably would be persecution, right? But anyway, the basics is you've got to show that you are going to be facing some serious harm, right? And if it's not serious harm, then we should probably talk because it might not rise to the level of persecution. All right. The third element is that persecution has to be, quote unquote, on account of one of the 5 grounds. So what do the words on account of even mean? Basically, it means that you have to look at the motive of the person that is harming you. Okay? You have to look at the intention of the bad guy, and that intention has to be kind of the 5 grounds that I'm about to discuss has to be that person's has to be one of the main reasons, one of the central reasons that that person wants to harm you. Okay, so what are those reasons? What are those motives? What are those grounds, as we call them? There are 5, and this is the 4th thing that we're talking about, but there are 5 of them. They have to be your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or your quote-unquote membership in a particular social group. Okay, so let me explain. If you're afraid that a bad person is going to come up and beat you over the head because that person doesn't like you, okay, you do not have an asylum case. If there are 5 people in your home country that have guns, that hate you, and that want to kill you because you offended them by wearing the, I don't know, I'm going to make something up. You offended them because you really like a soccer team, right? You probably don't have an asylum case. You have to show that the reason these people want to harm you is because of your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or your quote-unquote membership in a particular social group in your country. All right? So, if I'm talking about political opinion, there's a couple of things that I want to point out. First of all, you have to prove that you either have the opinion. First of all, you have to prove that either you have the opinion or the bad guys think you have it. Okay? And 2, you have to show that you either were persecuted because of that opinion that you have, or that you fear persecution because of that opinion. All right? The other thing I want to say is that a quote-unquote imputed political opinion can work. So, for example, if your father had a political opinion and people in your home country are attributing it to you just because of your family membership, then that can work. If they're going to harm you based on the political opinion of your dad, then hey, you might very well have a good asylum case. Also, I want to say that neutrality, or the refusing to take sides, can be considered a political opinion for asylum cases. The point is, your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or your membership in a particular social group has to be the motive, has to at least be one central reason for the bad guys harming you. All right? The 5th ground, which is the membership in a particular social group ground, that is the most nebulous, the most messy, the most difficult to explain ground. Everybody thinks, I avoided getting recruited into a gang, and therefore I automatically am a member of a particular social group in my country. It's very, very, very difficult to win that argument. It's been tried and it's failed. Okay? The social group requirements, the sort of basics of them, is that, the law has said, and the law has changed over the years, but the idea is that the group that you are saying that you're a member of has to have some immutable characteristic. It has to have some, something about the group that is so fundamental to your identity that you either can't or you should never be required to change it. Okay? What does that mean? Look, folks who are LGBT have I have won cases for folks from the LGBT community based on social group grounds. All right? Certain folks that are fleeing serious domestic violence in their home country, mostly women who are fleeing from domestic violence relationships in their home country, have arguments for fitting into a particular social group. Although each of those is very fact-specific, and we need to discuss it in your case. And we need to discuss it really depending on which country you're from as well. Family groups, if you're being persecuted based on your membership in your family, you might have a legitimate argument and a legitimate claim to being in a having a social group. But the type of case that we get most frequently is, I used to be a member of a gang and now I'm not, or I used to be a member of a church and therefore was getting targeted by a gang, and now, I'm not in that danger anymore because now I'm here, I'm still a member of a church maybe. If it's religious-based persecution, okay, but we would have to look at the details of what you're fearing very, very carefully, because generally speaking, it is very difficult to win cases where you're afraid of gang persecution. All right. So that's basically the bases for eligibility. You have to show, again, you have a well-founded fear of persecution on account of your race, your religion, your nationality, your political opinion, or your membership in a particular social group. If you can show that, then you have an asylum case, unless you hit one of the bars. Okay, there are bars to asylum, there are prohibitions to qualifying for asylum, and we need to talk about those right now before we really understand asylum eligibility. All right, so you are not eligible for asylum if you meet any of the following 7 big bars. All right, so the first and the most critical is if you failed to submit your application within 1 year of your arrival to the United States. It's called the 1-year bar. It is nasty, and you have to file for asylum within 1 year of your last entry, or you do not apply, you're not eligible, okay? The second bar is if you have acquired legal residence or citizenship in another safe country, all right? If you're a dual citizen in Peru and in Spain, right, and you have suffered all kinds of nasty violence in Peru, but you come to the United States seeking asylum from Peru, look, you could go to Spain. So the idea is, if there's a safe third country there that you can go to, you have the legal right to go there, you're not going to be eligible for asylum here in the U.S. The third is if you have participated in the persecution of other people before. And the persecution has to be on account of the other person's race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. The idea is, look, if you were involved in serious human rights atrocities, if you were involved in persecuting, harming other people, you shouldn't be eligible for asylum here, okay? The fourth is if you were convicted of a particularly serious crime. So if you're applying with a criminal record, we've got to look at your case very, very carefully. The fifth is if you have, quote-unquote, materially supported a terrorist organization or terrorist activity. So be careful with that. If you're from a part of the world, or even if you have provided anything to anyone that even could be within the realm of supporting terrorist organizations or terrorist activity, then talk to a lawyer and look at it very, very carefully, because this is a nasty, it applies in a lot more situations than you might think, okay? And six, if you're found to be a risk to the security of the United States, if you're found to be a terrorist, or if you're found that you have threatened to overthrow the government of the United States before, then you'll have a difficult asylum claim. And seven is if you have previously submitted what's called a frivolous application for asylum, and we'll discuss that in our third video, because it's one of the serious risks of submitting an application. If you submit one that is found to be frivolous, then you'll never be eligible for pretty much any form of immigration relief going forward. So those are the bars. The bar that I want to talk about in most detail, and I'm going to do it right now, is the 1-year bar. So there is a 1-year filing deadline. There are only 2 exceptions, and they're narrow exceptions. And so if you are looking to file for asylum, do it before the 1 year, and definitely if you've passed that 1 year already, have that consultation with an immigration lawyer before you apply, because it's too risky. Okay? The 2 exceptions that I mentioned are, first, based on changed circumstances. Okay? So if you have a change in your home country, if there's a new, like, coup, military takeover, something like that, and now all of a sudden you're afraid to go back, then okay, that could count. And that you still have to file within a reasonable time, and the law says 6 months. So after that change, you've got 6 months to submit your application. The second type of change that can work is a change in the applicants in your circumstances, your personal circumstances, that materially affects your eligibility for asylum. Okay? If you convert to a new religion, for example, that is being, incredibly and dangerously persecuted in your home country, we've got to show that it's legitimate. First of all, you can't just say, oh, I want asylum, so let's convert to a new religion. That does not work. Okay? But if that's the situation, then again, you would have 6 months from that date to apply. So if there's a change in you, or if there's a change in the country, you might get around the 1-year bar. The second are what's called, quote unquote, exceptional circumstances. And the law the regulations list about 5 that are that I'll detail here in just a minute. But the basics are that you have to show that there was an extraordinary circumstance that directly related to or directly caused your filing late, okay, and that the delay was reasonable. So again, within a 6-month period. So the list of circumstances that the regulations discuss are: 1, a medical illness or a medical injury if you suffer, okay? 2, a legal disability. So if you're under 18, if you're a minor under 18, the law sort of says that you have a legal disability and therefore you have an extension, you have an excuse to file late. The third is the ineffective assistance of counsel. So if you had bad legal advice, and that is the reason, and really the only reason, that you didn't file on time, then we have a lot of work to do. But that can be an argument that can get you asylum. Fourth is if you've maintained lawful immigration status. Okay, so if you have a valid visa for your first year here in the U.S., when that valid visa expires, you file that application within 6 months of it expiring, and you should be okay. All right. All right, and then 5 is a death or serious illness of an immediate family member. If that were to happen, that can constitute an exceptional circumstance. Again, you've got to file immediately thereafter, and you've got to show that that experience directly caused your filing late. All right, not easy. All right, so that is, I'm coming to the end of the first video. The only other thing I want to explain is if you have triggered the bars, all right, it doesn't mean that you don't have any case whatsoever necessarily. There are 2 other laws that we apply for when we apply for asylum. The first is called withholding of removal, or the law also calls it restriction of removal. And the second is what's called relief under the Convention Against Torture. I'm not going to go into them very much, but sometimes when you've triggered a bar to asylum, you may not have triggered a bar for withholding of removal or a bar under the relief, under CAT relief, under the Convention Against Torture. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. The next video should be out within the next 3 days. And I look forward to seeing you then. All right, take care. Bye.